Rosa Hernandez wiped her tired eyes as she stepped into the dimly lit lobby of the Sunshine Inn. The old fan above her head spun lazily, stirring the heavy night air. The clock on the wall glowed 11:45 p.m. in soft red numbers. It had been a long day. She had cleaned nearly every room, restocked towels, changed sheets, and straightened cushions. But this was her 9th month on the overnight shift, and she had grown used to the quiet hours. Most guests checked in during the evening rush, and by midnight, the motel settled into peaceful silence. She tied her dark hair into a neat bun, adjusted her worn navy uniform, and grabbed her cleaning cart. The cart was stacked high with fresh linens, extra soap bars, new bottles of shampoo, and toilet tissue. A spray bottle filled with gentle cleaning solution and a duster dangled from a hook on one side. On the other side, a small box of gloves peeked out. Rosa pushed it forward, the wheels clicking softly on the lino floor. Down the narrow hallway she went, pausing at each door to make sure it was locked tight. Her footsteps echoed with a comforting rhythm Rosa loved this time of night. It was her moment of calm when the world seemed to belong to just her and the dusty lamps that lined the corridors. Outside, a gentle breeze carried distant barn owls' calls and the faint hum of passing cars on the nearby highway. She imagined stories behind each closed door, a tired salesman on the road, a young couple on a getaway, maybe someone traveling to see family. Each guest brought a different energy, and she took pride in making their stay as comfortable as she. Could she entered room 5 and began her routine, change the sheets, wipe the surfaces, vacuum under the bed? The pale yellow walls looked fresh again when she sprayed the cleaner and wiped away smudges. The bright white towels she folded and stacked neatly on the rack gave the room a welcoming feel. Opened the drapes for a moment to peek outside. The moon hung low in the sky, a pale pearl casting silvery light over empty parking spaces. Rosa took a breath, letting the stillness fill her chest as she moved toward room 6. Her walkie-talkie crackled with static, then a soft voice. "Rosa, could you check on room 14? We've had a report of some noise." She pursed her lips. "Room 14? That was on the other side of the building." She tapped the button. "On my way," she replied, careful to keep her voice low. She hurried down the corridor, turning a corner, with her cart rattling. Carpet muffled her steps. She reached room 14 and pressed her ear against the door. There was nothing but silence. She rapped on the door frame. "Housekeeping," she called softly. No answer. She twisted the doorknob. Locked. She jotted down a quick note to ask the front desk if the guest needed anything. Smiling to herself, she turned back to her cart and wheeled it toward room 7. Time passed in a pleasant blur. Room 7, room 8, room 9. At midnight, she paused for a quick cup of steaming tea at the small break table near the vending machines. She sipped carefully, feeling the warmth chase away her growing weariness. Outside, the hotel sign cast an amber glow on her tired face. She thought about her children back home, sleeping safely under warm blankets. She missed them sometimes, but she knew her job kept food on the table and helped pay for their school clothes and supplies. Her break ended, and she tucked the empty cup into a plastic bag destined for the trash. She clipped on her gloves and pushed her cart back into the hallway. She checked her list. Rooms 10 through 20 were next. Room 10 glowed with a light beneath the door. Someone was still awake. She waited for a moment, then knocked gently. A muffled voice thanked her, and the door opened for her to slip in. The guest was a young businessman, feverishly typing away on his laptop. He looked up startled. "Oh, hi," he said, eyes bleary. "I didn't expect housekeeping at this hour." "Just cleaning," Rosa said with a friendly smile. She changed the sheets on his bed, replaced the towels, and straightened his desk chair. He asked for more coffee packs, which she happily delivered. He offered her a tip, but she politely declined. Small kindnesses were her gift to guests. At 2:30 a.m., she finished room 10 and moved on to 11. Room 11 was empty, a canceled reservation. The screen on the desk still displayed a blank message. After that, room 12 loomed ahead, its door slightly ajar. That was strange. She hadn't seen a check-in slip for this room tonight. She paused, heart fluttering. Pulling on a fresh pair of gloves, she tapped lightly on the frame. Pushed the door handle and found it unlocked, so she stepped in. The room looked neat, but the bed was unmade, as if someone had thrown themselves on it in a hurry. She frowned, noticing small drops of water on the floor by the bathroom door. Her instincts told her something was wrong. Quietly, she approached the bathroom and knocked on the closed door. A low groan came from inside. "Hello?" she said, voice soft. "Are you okay?" The groan came again, and then soft crying. Rosa moved quickly, dialing the front desk radio. "Front desk, this is Rosa. I need assistance in room 12. Possible. Guest in distress." On it came the calm reply. But Rosa did not wait. She opened the bathroom door gently. There, a man knelt by the toilet, clutching its edge, shaking violently. His face was ashen, his eyes wild and unfocused in the dim light. His shirt clung to him with sweat. Rosa's heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, kneeling beside him. "It's okay. Here to help." He looked up at her for a moment, confusion flickering across his features. Tried to speak, but only managed a weak, raspy whisper. She snapped on a flashlight from her belt and shone it on his face. He had dark circles under his eyes and thin lips that trembled. Rosa could smell the dry scent of sickness. She guided him gently away from the toilet to the bed, helping him sit down. "Take deep breaths," she soothed, laying a comforting hand on his back. He obeyed, hands shaking. She knelt on the floor, rummaging through her cart for a clean towel. She dampened it with warm water at the sink and pressed it to his forehead. The relief on his face was instant. "Thank you," he whispered, closing his eyes. Rosa noticed the small flash of gratitude, but also something else, fear. She scooped water into a plastic cup and helped him sip slowly. His breaths were ragged, and his arms trembled as he held the cup. Rosa encouraged him gently until the cup was empty. She called the front desk again. "Please send the nurse on call," she said. "This guest needs medical attention." As she waited, she stayed by his side, murmuring simple words of comfort. "You're safe here. Help is coming." She folded a pillow behind his back and settled him on the bed. She tidied the sheets around him, careful not to touch his skin directly, but keeping him covered. Outside, the distant highway lights blinked through the window. Within minutes, the nurse arrived, a kind woman with a medical bag. Rosa stepped back to give them privacy, but stayed close enough to offer anything they needed. The nurse checked his temperature and took his pulse. Rosa watched anxiously. The nurse frowned and spoke softly to the guest, pressing an oxygen mask to his face. He blinked at Rosa, eyes filled with relief. After a few tense minutes, the nurse gave Rosa a small nod. "He'll be okay for now," she said, gathering her things. "Keep him comfortable, and I'll check back in an hour." Rosa exhaled, feeling tension leave her shoulders. She smiled at the guest. "If you need anything else, just press the red button on the phone." He nodded weakly, closing his eyes again. Rosa tucked a fresh blanket around him and straightened. "The pillows one more time." She spoke softly as she left. "Sleep well. I'll be outside if you need me." She closed the door gently and leaned against it for a moment, her hand pressed to her heart. She had helped many guests, but something about this man felt different. His fear and pain had called to her, and she had answered without a second thought. Back in the hallway, she pushed her cart towards the elevator, her legs shaking slightly. She pressed the button and waited. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, but the silence felt soft now, not lonely. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Her mind replayed the image of the man's face, the way he had looked at her with gratitude. She wondered who he was, why he was here alone at this late hour, and what had made him so sick. The elevator dinged, and she stepped in, pressing the button for the front desk. As she descended, she thought of her own family, her mother asleep. In the next room of her modest house, her children dreaming peacefully. She would return home soon, in a few hours, and slip into bed, exhausted but satisfied. She would care for herself as gently as she had cared for that stranger. When she reached the lobby, the clock read 3:15 a.m. Rosa placed her cart in its usual spot and returned to her station. She recorded her note. Room 12, guest assisted with sudden illness at 3 a.m. Nurse on call alerted. Guest resting comfortably. Then she paused again, looking toward the hallway that led to room 12. She hoped the guest would be all right. For a moment, the motel felt full of possibility. Rosa straightened her uniform, her fatigue replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. She turned back to her duties, ready to face the rest of the night, knowing she had made a difference when it mattered most. Though she did not yet know his story, she felt that, in helping him, she had honored something greater than herself, a simple act of kindness that might change to lives, his and her own. Rosa didn't forget the man in room 12. Something about him stayed with her, even as she moved on with her shift. His pale face, weak voice, and lost eyes had touched her heart deeply. She had helped many guests before, some with colds, others with travel exhaustion, but this man was different. There was sadness in him, not just sickness. A deep kind of sadness that Rosa had seen only a few times in her life. Later that morning, just before her shift ended at 7 a.m., Rosa knocked on room 12 again. She brought him warm tea, a soft banana, and some dry toast from the motel kitchen. When she stepped inside, she found him sitting up slowly, his back resting against the headboard. He looked better than the night before, but still tired, like someone who had been carrying too much for too long. "Good morning," Rosa said gently. "I brought you something light." "The nurse said you should eat if you can." The man gave her a small smile. "Thank you," he said, his voice a little stronger now. "You didn't have to." "I know," Rosa replied, placing the tray carefully on the side table, "but I wanted to." He looked at her, then looked down at his hands as if unsure what to say next. She didn't ask any questions. She just straightened the blanket around his legs and opened the curtain a little so that the morning sun could peek in. The golden light made the room feel warmer. "I'm Rosa," she said softly. "I work the night shift here. Just wanted to make sure you're okay." The man nodded. "I'm Ethan." "That's a nice name," she replied with a kind smile. "You don't have to talk much. Just rest. I'll check on you again later." Ethan looked at her with a hint of something in his eyes. Maybe it was trust. Or maybe it was just surprise that a stranger could be so kind. As Rosa quietly turned to leave, he said, "Thank you, Rosa." "Really?" She nodded and stepped out, closing the door behind her gently. Over the next few days, Rosa continued to check in on Ethan. She brought him fresh towels, simple meals, and even a newspaper one morning. He began to open up a little, speaking more with each visit. At first, he only answered her questions with short replies. But slowly, as his strength returned, he started sharing more. Rosa never pushed him. She simply listened when he was ready. One night, Rosa brought him a warm bowl of soup. He was sitting near the window now, wearing a clean shirt and sipping water. The room smelled fresh, and he looked better, though still a little worn. "You're getting stronger," Rosa said cheerfully. "I am," he nodded. "Thanks to you." Rosa sat in the chair near the window for a few minutes, letting her legs rest. "You're not from around here, are you?" "No," Ethan replied. "I've been traveling." She waited, not asking anything more. I needed to get away," he said after a pause. "I ran away, actually." Rosa looked at him gently. "Sometimes people need space. That's okay." He took a deep breath. "My family is wealthy, old-fashioned. They planned my whole life out, including who I was going to marry. A woman I barely know. My father said it was a business deal more than a relationship. I didn't want it." Rosa blinked, surprised. "So you just left?" He nodded. "The wedding was supposed to be in 3 days. I packed a small bag, took my car, and drove for hours without stopping. I ended up here, sick, and unsure where to go next." Rosa was quiet for a moment. "That must have been hard." "It was," Ethan said. "But being here, meeting you, I don't know. It's the first time I've felt human in weeks." She smiled softly. "You are human, and you're free now." Ethan looked down at his hands again. "I don't know what I'm going to do next." Rosa stood up and walked to the table. She poured him another glass of water. One step at a time. You got out. You're resting. That's already something big. He looked up at her, a small smile forming. You're a kind person. Rosa chuckled. Just a motel cleaner with 2 kids and strong coffee. Ethan laughed for the first time. It was small, but real. The room felt lighter. That night, Rosa sat in the staff lounge during her break and thought about Ethan's story. She had never imagined someone like him, a millionaire, running from a fancy wedding, would end up in her motel, needing her help. But life had a strange way of crossing paths. She was proud of herself for treating him like any other guest. Hey. So. Hey. That is now. She cared about his pain, his story, and his heart. The next evening, Rosa brought him a book. From the motel's small shelf of forgotten items, it was a mystery novel. It's a little worn, but still readable. I thought you might like something to pass the time, she said. Thank you, Ethan said, looking at the book with real gratitude. I haven't read anything in weeks. It's days. Past, Ethan slowly returned to his normal self. He shaved, changed clothes, and even walked outside once or twice to feel the fresh air. Rosa noticed the change. His shoulders were no longer slumped. His eyes were clearer, but he still hadn't decided what to do next. One night, as the sky turned dark and stars appeared, Rosa found Ethan standing outside his room, looking up at the sky. Nice night, she said, joining him. It is, he said. Do you think I made the right choice? Rosa looked at him thoughtfully. Only you can decide that. But I know this, any choice that brings you closer to your truth, to peace, is a step in the right direction. Ethan nodded. I might want to do something good with my life. Something real. It's not just business deals and family traditions. You already did something good, Rosa said. You've listened to your heart. That's not easy. They stood in silence for a moment. The night air was cool and filled with quiet crickets. I'll be leaving soon, Ethan finally said. I need to figure out where to go. Maybe a new city. Maybe just somewhere I can start fresh. Rosa smiled. Wherever you go, just remember, you don't have to be rich or important to be kind. That's what really matters. He looked at her with warmth in his eyes. You've helped me more than you know, Rosa. You didn't ask for anything. You just cared. She shrugged gently. That's how I was raised. We help when we can. Simple as that. As she turned to go back inside, Ethan called out softly, Thank you for seeing me. Not for what I have, but for who I am. She smiled and gave a small wave. Take care of yourself, Ethan. Inside, Rosa returned to her. Shift. Heartful. She knew she might never see Ethan again, but something inside her told her she had done the right thing. She had helped a man in need, not knowing who he was, not expecting anything in return. And that made her night, her job, and even her quiet life feel deeply meaningful. She didn't know what would come next for Ethan, but she knew this. W. The next morning, Rosa came in early for her shift. She didn't have to, but something inside her pulled her back to the motel before her usual time. Maybe it was concern for Ethan, or maybe it was the quiet connection that had grown between them. She brought a small bag of fruit, some bread rolls, and a thermos of homemade herbal tea she had prepared in her own kitchen. It was her mother's old recipe for strength and calm. She hoped it might help him feel a little better inside and out. As she walked down the hallway toward room 12, She noticed something had changed. The door was shut tight now. No light leaked from under it. No sound came from inside. She knocked gently. "Ethan, it's Rosa." There was a pause, then the sound of slow footsteps. The door creaked open. Ethan stood there with a clean shirt, slightly wrinkled and freshly combed hair. He still looked tired, but his posture had improved. He smiled when he saw her. "Morning," he said quietly. "Morning," Rosa replied, holding up the bag. "I brought breakfast. It's not fancy, but it's made with love." Ethan stepped aside, letting her in. "You really didn't have to, but thank you." She placed the food on the table and began pouring the tea. The steam floated gently in the air. "You're looking stronger," she observed. "I feel stronger." He said, "Your kindness, your presence here, it's helped me more than I expected." They sat at the small table by the window. The morning light filtered in through the thin curtains, painting the room in soft gold. Outside, birds chirped quietly, and the motel parking lot stood still under the early sun. Ethan took a bite of the bread roll and a sip of tea. He closed his eyes. "This reminds me of my childhood. Before everything became about business and appearances," Rosa listened, giving him space. "My mother used to make tea like this," he continued. "She passed away when I was 15. After that, my father took control of everything. Our lives, our future, our decisions. I was too young to push back then." Rosa nodded slowly. "It must have been hard." It was. "And when I got older, I became part of that world. Suits, meetings, decisions that didn't feel like mine. My father decided I needed to marry the daughter of his business partner. A deal, not a love story." He paused and looked down. "I don't even know the girl. She's nice, I guess. But we've barely had any real conversation, I could tell. She wasn't happy either. We were just chess pieces in someone else's game." Rosa folded her hands. "So you ran?" He nodded. "Had to. My heart felt heavy every day. I knew if I went through with it, I'd lose myself forever. So I left everything behind: my car, my phone. Even my assistant didn't know where I was going. I just drove, ended up here," Rosa finished with a smile. "Here with you," Ethan said warmly. "And for the first time, someone helped me, not because of my last name, not because of my money, but just because I was human." Rosa looked at him gently. "It's the only reason that matters." Ethan stared out the window for a long moment. "I've been thinking a lot about how I've lived, about what I really want. I think I was so busy being who everyone else wanted me to be, I forgot who I really am." "That happens," Rosa said softly. "Sometimes we live so long in someone else's idea of us that we forget we're allowed to be ourselves." Ethan turned to her. "What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from something that didn't feel right?" Rosa smiled gently. "Once, I was offered a job as a manager at a big hotel in the city. It paid better, had more benefits. It meant leaving my kids behind with my mother. Thought about it, but in the end, I couldn't do it. My children were still small. They needed me more than I needed the money." He nodded slowly. "That must have been a hard choice." "Was," she admitted, "but it was the right one. I don't regret it." Ethan sighed. "You're brave." "No," Rosa said. "Just honest with myself. That's the best any of us can do." The next few days passed quietly. Rosa continued her work at the motel, and every evening she checked in on Ethan. Sometimes they talked. Other times, they just sat in silence. He began reading the book she had given him, even helped her once, offering to carry a heavy box of towels. She smiled as he did it. It was the first time she had seen him move like someone ready to step back into the world. But one night, she finished folding bed sheets in the laundry room. Rosa got a call from the front desk. Rosa, the manager, said, sounding worried. "Two men in suits are asking about a guest. They mentioned room 12. They say they're friends, but something feels off." Rosa's heart dropped. She hung up quickly and rushed to the hallway, her shoes made quick. Steps on the tiles as she reached room 12. She knocked fast. "Ethan, it's me. Open up." The door swung open. Ethan's face was pale again, but this time with fear, not fever. "They found me," he whispered. "I don't know how, but they did." "They're in the lobby," Rosa said, glancing behind her. "We need to get you out of here now." Without waiting, she grabbed a jacket from the chair and handed it to him. "Follow me." She led him through the back hallway near the storage rooms. It was a path most guests didn't know about, opened into the service lot behind the motel. The air was cold and filled with the distant sound of tires rolling on asphalt. "I have a friend who works at a shelter downtown," she said as they walked quickly. "It's quiet and safe. You can stay there for a while. Nobody will look for you there." Ethan followed her silently, holding the jacket tight around himself. When they reached her old car, she opened the passenger door and waved him in. The engine rattled, but it started. They drove in silence for a while. Streetlights passed by like blinking stars. Finally, Ethan spoke. "You didn't have to do this, I know," Rosa said. "But I wanted to." He looked at her with eyes full of emotion. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," she replied. "Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "When this is over, when you're strong again, don't go back to the life that made you run." He nodded slowly. "I promise." They reached the shelter. Rosa spoke to the night worker and made arrangements. Ethan would stay there for a few days. It wasn't luxury, but it was safe and quiet, just what he needed. Before she left, Ethan turned to her. "Rosa, I don't know who you really are, but you've reminded me of who I am, and I'll never forget you." She smiled and hugged him briefly. "Take care, Ethan. You're not running anymore. You're choosing." As she drove back to the motel, her eyes filled with quiet tears, not of sadness, but of peace. Because sometimes helping someone else find their path helps you find your own. She had cleaned rooms her whole life, but in helping Ethan, she had cleaned away something more powerful, a man's fear, a stranger's loneliness, and the dust that covered a soul too long hidden. Rosa arrived for her evening shift just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The pink glow in the sky faded, and the motel's neon sign flickered to life, casting a soft light over the parking lot. She pushed her cart down the silent corridor, toward room 12, thinking about Ethan and hoping he was resting well. She passed empty doors, the carpet warm under her shoes. At the front desk, she paused when she saw two men in dark suits talking quietly with the night clerk. The clerk looked nervous, glancing down at a small notebook. Rosa's heart skipped a beat. She recognized those men. They looked sharp and serious. Like business agents or private investigators she had seen on TV, she slowed her steps, listening. One of the men asked, "Is Mr. Johnson still here?" The clerk read from the notebook. "Yes, room 12. Stable condition. But he needs privacy." The other man frowned. "We were told he'd check out today." Rosa's stomach tightened. They knew Ethan's name, and they had come to take him away. She bit her lip to keep calm, then quietly slipped away from the desk. She needed to warn him before they did. Hurrying down the hallway, she reached room 12 and knocked softly. "Ethan, it's Rosa." Inside, the door opened a crack. Ethan stood there in simple clothes, holding the mystery novel she had given him. His face looked calm, but when he saw the worried look on Rosa's face, he stepped back to let her in. "Shh." She closed the door behind her and lowered her voice. "Two men in suits just asked for you at the desk," she whispered. "They called you Mr. Johnson." Ethan's jaw tightened. He had used a fake name at check-in to protect himself. Now his cover was blown. "We have to leave," he said quietly, glancing at the window. He peered out through a small gap in the curtains. The parking lot was dark, but he could see the silhouettes of two men walking slowly toward the front door. Rosa glanced down the hall, then back at him. "There's a back exit near the laundry room," she said. "Follow me." She grabbed his arm gently and led him through the small service hallway. The lights were dim there, and the lockers and supply shelves created shadows that hid them. They moved quickly but carefully, their footsteps soft on the tile. The emergency exit door stood at the far end, painted bright red with a small sign above it that read "Exit." Rosa pressed the handle and pushed it open, feeling the night air rush in. Outside, the world was quiet. The parking lot lay empty except for a few cars near the lit sign. Ethan blinked in the sudden cold, his breath misting in the air. Rosa kept one hand on his arm as they hurried across the asphalt toward her old sedan parked near the dumpster. She unlocked the car and opened the passenger door for Ethan. He slid inside, closing the door softly. Rosa got in behind the wheel, her hands trembling slightly as she started the engine. The car coughed to life. The night was still, no other cars moved, no voices called out. Rosa glanced at the rear-view mirror and saw the two men in suits approaching the motel doors. She pressed the gas pedal gently, pulling the car backward until she cleared the driveway. When she turned onto the empty road, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. Ethan sat beside her, breathing hard. Rosa slowed the car to a steady roll. "Where should we go?" she asked. Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a small piece of paper with an address. "There's a women's shelter downtown," he said. "You mentioned you volunteered there." Rosa nodded. She had helped at that shelter before, organizing food drives and simple repairs. It was safe and always welcomed people in need. She punched the address into her car's old GPS. As they drove, the motel lights faded behind them. The road stretched ahead, two dark lanes under a sky dotted with stars. Ethan looked out the window at empty storefronts and distant streetlights. Every now and then he would glance at Rosa, gratitude shining in his tired eyes. She kept her focus on the road, hands steady on the wheel, but inside she felt her heart race. Helping Ethan had already changed her life in ways she could not explain. Now she was driving him toward safety, away from a family who would force him into a life he did not want. After a short drive, they pulled up in front of a low brick building. A modest sign near the door read Hope Shelter. The lights inside glowed warmly, and through the windows Rosa could see people sharing a meal and chatting softly. She parked the car and turned off the engine. Ethan leaned forward, opening his door. He paused, looking at her. "Thank you," he said again, his voice low but steady. "I couldn't have done this without you." Rosa smiled gently. "You did this yourself," she replied. "Just pointed you in the right direction." Ethan stepped out and closed his door. Rosa followed him to the entrance, where a kind woman in a sweater welcomed them. Rosa explained quickly, "He needs a safe place to stay for a few days. I'll cover the cost." The woman nodded and led them inside. The hall smelled of warm soup and clean floors. Residents were gathered at round tables, laughing and talking softly as volunteers served plates of food. The atmosphere was calm and caring. Ethan looked around, taking it all in. "This place, it feels like home," he said softly. He turned to Rosa. "I know it's not much, but it's the first real shelter I've ever had." Rosa touched his arm. "You deserve kindness and rest," she said. "You'll be safe here, I promise." She handed the woman at the desk some papers, and the shelter lady smiled warmly at Ethan. "Welcome," she said. "You can stay in room 3. Rosa watched as Ethan followed the shelter worker down a short hallway. They passed soft beds and windows overlooking a small garden in the back. Then the worker showed him to a room, a little space with a bed, a small dresser, and a window that looked out onto the garden path. Ethan unpacked the few items he had brought. Placing them carefully beside the bed, Rosa stood in the doorway, her eyes misty. "I should go," she said softly. "You need time to rest and plan your next step." Ethan walked over and gave her a gentle hug. "Thank you for everything, Rosa. I don't know how to repay you." She patted his back. "Just live the life you choose," she said. "That's enough for me." He nodded, his eyes full of emotion. She turned and walked away down the hallway. Each step felt heavy and light at the same time, heavy with the weight of what had happened. Light with relief that he was safe. As she reached the lobby, she paused and looked back at the closed door of room 3. She offered a silent prayer for Ethan's peace and safety, then stepped outside into the night. The air was cool, and the sky bright with stars. Rosa walked back to her car, her uniform neat, but her heart full of stories she would carry with her. She thought of Ethan's promise to live for himself, and felt a quiet hope that he would keep it. As she drove back to the motel, the world felt both larger and smaller in the roads they had traveled. Smaller because a single act of kindness had tied 2 lives together forever. When she returned to the sunshine, and the night clerk glanced up from her desk. "Did everything go okay?" she asked. Rosa nodded, giving a small smile. "He's safe," she replied. The clerk relaxed, and the two shared a quiet moment of understanding before Rosa resumed her duties. She walked the halls again, checked on rooms and straightened furniture, but something inside her had changed. She no longer saw these halls as just a job. She saw them as a place where moments of compassion and courage could happen. Even at 3 a.m., even in the quietest hours, and though she did not know what tomorrow would bring, Rosa felt certain of this. When kindness met courage, it could open a path to freedom and hope no matter how late the hour or how dark the night. Weeks had passed since Rosa last saw Ethan at the Hope Shelter. The nights at the Sunshine Inn still felt quiet, but now each hallway held a memory of his trembling voice and fearful eyes. Rosa went about her duties as usual, wiping counters, changing sheets, restocking towels, yet her heart felt different. She thought of Ethan often. She wondered if he was truly safe, starting his new life free from his family's plans. She told herself she would not expect anything in return. Still, a small part of her hoped to hear from him again. One morning, just as the sun rose in soft pink light, Rosa walked into the lobby and paused. On the front desk sat a small white envelope with no return address. It rested beside the sign-in book, looking almost out of place. She picked it up with careful hands, curious. There was no stamp, just her name, Rosa Hernandez, written in neat, familiar handwriting. Her pulse quickened. She opened the envelope and found a letter. Folded inside, along with 2 tickets, she unfolded the note and read Ethan's words in simple script. He wrote that he had found his strength again because of her kindness at 3 a.m. He said he had sold enough assets to live on his own terms and to help others in need. He had started a small foundation to support men and women escaping forced marriages. He thanked her for seeing him as a person, not as a name or a debt. At the end of the note, he surprised her with 2 tickets to the Harvest Moon Festival in her hometown, a celebration she had told him she once visited as a child. Rosa's eyes filled with tears as she held the tickets. She remembered the colorful lanterns, the smell of roasted corn, the laughter of children chasing each other under orange autumn trees. She felt a rush of joy that Ethan had remembered this small piece of her past. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her apron pocket. She stood there for a moment, breathing slowly. Then she smiled, a gentle curve of her lips, knowing that a simple act of help had grown into something beautiful. That evening, Rosa called her sister Maria and made plans. She explained she needed a short break from her shifts, just 2 days. Maria was delighted and promised to watch the children. Rosa felt a lightness she had not felt in weeks. The next morning, she packed a small bag with a warm sweater, her favorite scarf, and the letter from Ethan. She locked the motel door behind her as she left, pressing the tickets in her hand. Her feet seemed lighter on the pavement as she drove toward the highway that led back to her hometown. When Rosa arrived at the Harvest Moon Festival, the air was cool and fragrant with apples and cinnamon. Orange lanterns hung from wooden stalls, and voices mixed with the soft music of a folk band by the fountain. She walked slowly past tables of homemade pies, jars of local honey, and bouquets of dried flowers. The crowd moved like a river of happy faces, children with painted cheeks, couples holding hands, elders nodding at old friends. Rosa felt a warm glow in her chest as she slid her ticket from her pocket. She followed the path toward a larger tent with a banner that read Freedom and Hope Foundation. Beneath the banner were photos of smiling people, a simple logo, and pamphlets explaining how to seek help to start a new life. Rosa felt her breath catch as she recognized the name Ethan had given her, Freedom and Hope. She picked up a pamphlet and read about support groups, legal advice, and safe housing. She realized the foundation was small but passionate, run by people who believed in second chances. Just then, a voice drifted through the air, a clear voice speaking softly into a microphone. Rosa turned toward a wooden stage where a man in a simple shirt and jeans stood by a single mic stand. He spoke about his journey, how he had escaped a life not of his choosing, how fear used to control his days, and how one night at a modest motel, A cleaner named Rosa had offered him kindness when he was at his weakest. The crowd listened in, respectful silence. Rosa's heart pounded when she heard her name. She felt a gentle tug at her sleeve and saw Ethan stepping down from the stage. Making his way toward her, he stood before her, eyes bright with gratitude. He held out his hand, then dropped it to hug her. She wrapped her arms around him, feeling the solid ground beneath her and the warmth of his thanks. Around them, family and friends and strangers offered smiles and applause. Ethan led Rosa to a nearby bench under a canopy of lanterns. He spoke in a low voice, telling her how the foundation had helped 3 families already, how they had found new homes and new hope, and how he had used the money he sold to fund safe travel and legal fees. Rosa listened, her eyes shining. She felt proud of him, proud that he had the courage to choose his own path and to help others do the same. She told him about her children, how they were growing fast, and how Maria had agreed to help with shifts until she returned. Ethan nodded, his smile warm. He said he wanted to do more, that his foundation would grow slowly but steadily, always guided by respect and compassion. After their talk, they walked through the festival together. Rosa tasted a slice of pumpkin pie handed to her by a vendor who knew her from childhood. Ethan laughed as he dipped a caramel apple into a warm cup of chocolate. They shared small bites, tasting the festival's gifts like friends reunited. Rosa showed him the old carousel where she used to ride as a child. She pointed out the faded paint on the horses and remembered the day she learned to ride without her mother's hand. As night fell, the festival came alive with fireworks. Bright stars exploded above the crowd, painting the sky in red-green. In gold, Rosa and Ethan stood side by side on a small hill, watching the lights. She felt a deep sense of peace. The past months had been hard. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and worry. But now she saw how a single choice to help a stranger had opened doors for both of them. Ethan turned to her under the final burst of light. "I owe you everything," he whispered. Rosa shook her head. "No," she said softly. "You owed yourself this chance. I just reminded you of it." He smiled and took her hand gently. They watched the last firework fade, leaving soft sparks in the sky. The next morning, Rosa returned to the Sunshine Inn with a heart full of new memories. She walked the same halls, her steps steady and her spirit light. She had a small token with her, a photograph of Ethan speaking at the festival, holding a pamphlet and smiling. She placed it at the front desk where guests could see it, a quiet reminder that kindness lived here. When a new guest checked in, she saw their tired eyes and remembered Ethan's fear. She offered a simple question: "Can I get you anything tonight?" And she meant it with all her heart. Rosa knew her life would not be the same. She continued her work, but now she saw each room not as a task on her list, but as a chance to be kind, a chance to make someone's midnight hour a little brighter. And though she did not know where Ethan's foundation would go, she believed it would help many, because it began with a small act of care at 3 a.m., and sometimes in the quietest moments, that care could turn the darkest night into a dawn of hope.